welcome to this week's episode of the Kitchen Table Podcast, coming to you live from the kitchen table next to the now famous ceramic rooster. First off this week, need to thank everyone for coming out to some great events this past weekend. We had an amazing turnout. We got to talk to a bunch of people. Everyone seemed to be loving the beer. I have to say, I've never seen so many people drinking our products in one place that quickly, like I did at Whole Foods Wexford on Saturday. Amazing crowd. Even had a couple of people gift me a North Country, I think it was, no, Shoe Brew. It was the Shoe Brew collaboration with Dave DiCello. Super excited to try that one. Got that one in the fridge to drink this week. But just need to thank everybody for coming out. We had some incredible stuff on tap at a couple of different places. I thought the events went really, really well. It was a great 30th anniversary party at Whole Foods. So thank you to everyone for that. Big episode for us this week. We have our first interview. Nick Bogacz, the owner of the Caliente Pizza and craft beer bar chain, is on the podcast. Went out and got a chance to talk to him really at length this week. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy that interview. Got to talk about a wide range of topics. Everything from starting and running a business, growing a culture within a business, the craft beer industry, how it's evolved, how Nick was really one of the first movers in the industry in this area, really pushing it. Got some insight on a little bit of the gray market stuff that he used to get into. Doesn't anymore just because the market's kind of caught up. But we got some insight on kind of the gray market stuff that he used to get into. I know a lot of you are going to be interested to hear about that. And really got to talk about how well their new Monroeville location is doing. So if you have not been out, make sure to get out to Monroeville. They are killing it out there right now. I was there. We were doing on a Sunday evening. I think I want to say I left around 4. It was packed. So really, really good to see him doing well out there. It was amazing getting our first interview under our belts. Had a great time. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy that interview. Just real quick before we get to the interview, we've got some more great stuff coming up this week. We have a fresh batch of Odd Side dropping this week. That's going to include the Diggity Dank Juice New England IPA, the Alpha Beta IPA, and the Strawberry Hot Milk IPA. So 3 fresh IPAs dropping from them. Those are going to be cans and draft. We're going to have some more fresh single cut dropping at the end of the week as well. So some really good stuff to look forward to. No Burley Oak Hype Beasts this week, but we're still bringing some really good stuff, and hopefully we will have some more Hype Beasts for you back in the next couple of weeks. That is a constant effort from us. And for those of you asking, we should be seeing some more Burley Oak come into this market. We are hoping at this point to get some intermittent drops. But yeah, it should be coming back. Obviously, we'll update you when we have more info on that. But we will have some killer hype stuff to track down next week, I believe. Coming up this week, event-wise, the main one we're doing is going to be at the Whole Foods in South Hills. I believe technically it's Upper St. Clair. That'll be Friday at, I believe, 5 o'clock. Single Cut sent us a special keg of the Double Whammy Imperial IPA. Actually, we reviewed that one. Just a quick note, we're actually putting up some beer review videos. Every week, we're going to focus on a couple of beers releasing in the last week and kind of do a quick review on the YouTube channel. If you're looking to track down our YouTube channel, you can get the YouTube version of the podcast up there, our Friday weekend beer updates, our now beer review series. I believe the best way to find it now is search my name, Shane Lohman, ShaneLohman. I've been trying to get the Steel City tags up there, so you can search it that way as well. We'll keep you updated on that. And for those of you asking about the podcast on Apple Podcasts, for some reason, it's only the first episode showing up right now. We're going to try and get that taken care of. We appreciate your patience there. Right now, it's just SoundCloud and YouTube, but we are working to remedy that situation. But yeah, so this Friday, Whole Foods, South Hills, 5 p.m., get some Double Whammy. They're going to have a bunch of other stuff. As with all of our other events, we'll post a draft list for that event as we get closer here later in the week. But I know some killer stuff went out to them. A couple other things to hit on real quick. There was a Hardwater April Fool's Tap takeover at Piper's. It was a good time. There was only 2 or 3 Hardwater kegs really on draft. I think some people got a good laugh at it. You can stop with the couple of snarky, angry email/Instagram messages we got. It was all in good fun. We put down some Hardwaters on Friday night, had some of the Steel City team out at Piper's. That was actually turned into a really good time, as it usually does with our team when we're out hanging out at accounts. Other than that, just a killer week. Like I said, Oddside, we're really excited about that dropping this week. We are working on some stuff for next week as well, as always. Other than that, let's get right into the interview with Nick. Like I said, I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one, so here we are. All right, this week we have our first interview on the podcast. Nick Bogacz, the owner of the Caliente Pizza and craft beer chain. Nick, thanks for coming. Very excited about this one. Really one of the early movers in craft beer here in Pittsburgh. We were kind of talking about the gray market stuff that you did. What got you into that? What really made you think that was the move or a good decision? Because you were really before anyone else was doing it.
Sure. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I think it's a good question, and really what it was for me is when I opened up, I realized that craft beer and pizza was a good marriage because, we had we're in the back cutting our own vegetables, making our own cheese, making the sauce, making the dough every day. And then the craft brewers are doing the same thing. They're putting their passion into their product. So I thought, why not marriage craft beer and our craft pizza together? And then what I noticed was when I was calling a lot of the wholesalers and asking for these specialty kegs, for instance, the first one was Mad Elf, that I realized that people were asking for it. And I said, if I can get Mad Elf, people will line up for it and they'll fill the bar for it. And when I would call and ask for it, they would say, hey, you didn't buy enough of Trogs XYZ for the last year. And meanwhile, I've only been open about 2 months. So they wouldn't sell me a keg. So then I realized I'd start asking for these other things. The next thing was Hop Slam that came out. When I started asking for that, I got told the same thing. So then I realized, eventually started looking at all the different craft beer bars in Pittsburgh, and I figured that's how we want to be, is we want to be in the same breath as the Mad Mexes and the Smokin' Joes and the D's and Huffs at the time. And I realized, I said, I want to have their tap list, so I was trying to get a lot of the beer that they had, and then I also wanted to be different. And when I stumbled upon House of 1,000 Beers at that time, there was beers on their tap list that nobody else had, and I said, well, how the heck are they getting these beers? And that's when I went ahead and started researching it and figured out that they were going across the state to Philly and grabbing beer from out there and then bringing it back. So then I had called my lawyer actually and asked him, hey, how do I do this? And he told me that I couldn't do it. He said, because you own a liquor license, so you're not able to get a transport license. Yep. So then I figured out that it didn't have to be in my name. So we went ahead and put it in someone else's name that wasn't in my name. So then we had a transport license and a liquor license, and we were able to go across the state, pick up beer from a distributor, and then bring it back. So we literally would go out, and I think the first time we spent about $3,500, maybe like 8 different barrels, bunch of different cases, brought it back. Next time we probably did it with about $500 worth of beer, and then by the third trip we were taking a Suburban that we would rent from Enterprise and then bringing it back with like the ass end scraping back across the across the turnpike with probably like literally 20 half barrels, 10 sixtels, and like 15 cases just shoved in there. It was like Jenga trying to fit everything in. And I remember probably the third trip saying, once this all gets out that we have this beer, we're going to be busy from here on out. And what was cool was I didn't have to go and find the Mad Elf. I could just bring back a Firestone Union Jack that was a regular keg that they make every day and bring it back here. And because not everybody can get Union Jack around here, that becomes that specialty beer. Yep. And the best part is there isn't 10 or 12 bars selling it. It's either us or House of 1,000. And for them, they were a little bit outside of the Pittsburgh market a little bit. So I think it even helped us being right in the city and then being able to bring a lot of this beer in.
Was there a marketing strategy to let people know you had that beer, or just word of mouth?
So at that time, it was back when Craft Beer Week was something special, and I had joined it the very first year. It was the second year they were in, the first year that we were in business, and I basically joined it because I wanted to jump on and be part of the same breadth of those guys I just mentioned. They were all on the back of the shirts, so I signed up as a sponsor and became on the back of the shirts next to those big craft beer bars. Then I realized that Craft Beer Week at the time had 10,000 followers on Facebook, and this is 2013, and I had 700. That week we doubled our sales for Craft Beer Week. That's how busy we were. So I said, if I can get to 10,000 followers on Facebook, we can double our sales. So I did everything to figure out how to get 10,000 followers, including calling Facebook and asking them how I get 10,000 followers. They said, give us $1,500 a month and we'll teach you. So for once a week, for an hour, they would get online. And I actually remember the guy's name still. It was Romeo. He would get on the phone and he would go ahead and talk to me for an hour on my screen. He'd link up and he would teach me how to use Facebook for business, how to read all the analytics, and how to the demographics, and how to market our business on there. And over time, and that's when we grew from 2 bartenders out front and 2 cooks in the back to 5 people up front, 6 in the back. We built out the whole basement downstairs. Then we built another store, and it was all through Facebook. So by the time we were starting to grab this beer in late 2013, that's when I just started putting it on Facebook. Like, I would line everything up and take pictures and then put it on Facebook and boost it like crazy back in like 2013. Like, look at this haul that we just got. And it was funny because I think you'll appreciate this with the business you're in too. Probably the 4th or 5th time that we grabbed a real big haul, the liquor control board came in, because probably one of the other bars kind of rattled on us, I think.
100% that happened.
Right. And when I laid out in front of him the transport license and everything, he just looked at me. He's like, yep, you figured it all out. He's like, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
So he's like, not too many people could figure that out. And I think it was just talking to a lot of different people. Like, everyone gave me a different hint of how to get that transport license. Like, nobody really knew what it was at that time. And now the laws have shifted, so we don't do it at all anymore. But it was back then, you had a good 4 years where you could do it legally, and we took advantage of it all the way to the fullest.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I had my beer store, I'd come down for releases. You guys had Cigar City, and those were good times.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely made you guys a destination, put you guys on the map early on.
For sure. And I think what also was cool was we'd have some of this Cigar City, and then when they did finally come to Pittsburgh, they showed us love for being there before that.
Yeah.
Same thing with like Lost Abbey. We ended up having Tommy Arthur in the building pouring beers once they came to town, just because they were so excited that we were grabbing all his beer. Some of these guys would not really appreciate that we were grabbing the beer, like some of the breweries.
Yeah.
Basically because they felt like that they were sending it just for the Philly market. But then some of them, like Lost Abbey, was so happy. As long as it was fresh, they were more than happy that we were bringing it here. And they actually sent 5 different beers in for the release of Lost Abbey. And when Tommy showed up, we had 14 different beers on. And he's like, we only sent 5. And I was like, well, we have 14. And he was like, this is the best release we've ever came to. Like, he was so appreciative.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where do you think craft beer's gone the last 5 years since you've kind of been in it? And
yeah, well, I think what's interesting is it's shifted from 7 local breweries to 50 plus in Western Pennsylvania. So that's been the big shift. So that's probably number one thing that's happened.
Are you a fan of that?
I think it's raised awareness of craft beer. So I think you have to be a fan of what it's done as far as raising awareness. I also think that there's been a big push with the local breweries. So what you end up getting is you get a lot of support throughout the county that you didn't have before. You get a lot of awareness. You get a lot of support from the local breweries, are helping each other and helping the community. I think the other thing that you've gotten is it's shaped the way that things used to happen. I think before, when there's only 7 breweries and there's all these different bars, the breweries are happy to come to the bars. Now I think you have so many breweries and there's so many breweries that they're actually almost too busy doing what they're doing, so their time is limited. It's made it a little tougher for them having so many breweries. It seems like that they realize they have a lot of competition,
right,
where before they didn't. So I think they maybe struggle with that a little bit. But I also think like the next thing that happened was you have the Sheets and Geckos that have popped up in the last 5 years with the beer laws that changed. So we didn't have that before. And then the third thing would be the 6-pack shops. The beer distributors turning into 6-pack shops. So you had 3 things that happened in the last 5 years that before that it was a totally different landscape.
You think it's in a good place right now?
I think it's in a great place. And I think, to be clear too, I do think that the local beer scene is definitely good for craft beer, especially in Pittsburgh. I think you're getting more people coming into Pittsburgh from out of town to try all the different local breweries. I know there's a lot of friends I have from outside of the city that when they do come in, you see them tagging 5 or 6 different breweries they can hit real quick.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing. I think that it's just, I think going back to the awareness thing, like, before it was like people kind of knew what craft beer was, but I think the local brewers have done a really good job of opening up, and everybody kind of knows what craft beer is now.
Yeah, I think it's definitely put Pittsburgh on the map. I know when we go talk to breweries about coming to Pittsburgh because of the Dancing Gnomes and the Grist House, they've heard of it, whereas maybe when we first started 3 years ago, it was, why would we come to Pittsburgh? So it's kind of put craft beer on the map, I think.
Yeah.
For Pittsburgh as a whole. I know it's kind of a time of flux for the industry. What do you think you see happening with craft beer the next year or two?
Well, I've kind of said it from the beginning with all the different craft breweries. I think it's anytime that there's a flux in business like that, you do see the ones who are fiscally responsible be able to make it in the long haul, because there's only so much supply and demand.
Right.
I think that might be farther away than 2 years, but I think that's definitely one thing that you'll see happen. I do think that craft beer is so trendy that I'm sure there's another trend that we don't even know about coming up yet, and that's probably one thing that'll happen. I do think that probably get more national presence than what's happening now too. I don't think it's peaked yet of some of these different lists that the local breweries end up on. So I think there's still going to be a lot of spotlight on Pittsburgh for craft beer that's still coming that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So as much as you've done for craft beer, I was reading your new book, The Pizza Equation. And like we talked about before we got on here, I love reading books from small business owners because I feel like it's a lot more relatable as someone that's trying to make it in small business more than an Elon Musk, where I'm never going to send a spaceship to Mars. It's really kind of getting into it and hearing from another small business owner, because there's so much that goes into starting and running a business. I feel like it's so hip now, but a lot of people still don't know what goes into it kind of on the day-to-day basis. Kind of talk about how you got your start. I know in the book you talk about you started out as a pizza delivery driver. Kind of take me through the journey and the timeline from that point to opening your first store at 33.
Yes. Yeah, so basically what it was is I started as a delivery driver at 17, and I just fell in love with the pizza business. I fell in love with the atmosphere. I was always a big sports fan and loved team sports, and I think that was really what I fell in love with in the pizza business was you had a product like pizza that people always, when you go to the door, are happy that you're delivering it. And I think for that, the process of making it and delivering it and just all the different people that worked there. And like there was probably like 25 people that worked the first shop I was there, and it was all different characters, and it was just fun. And I had a manager who was at the time I didn't even realize it, but he was good at camaraderie and good at welcoming you in and make you feel like you're part of the team. So I just fell in love with it. And then by the time I was 21, I got married. We were pregnant with our first child, and I realized I needed more than being a driver. And at that time, I had been a shift manager and a kitchen manager. So I went out and became a general manager. I left the first franchise group that I was with, went to another one to be a general manager, worked there for like a year and a half. And really, that was where, part of the book that I wrote, The Pizza Equation, what I tried to do was show that when I worked for all these different places, I picked up different tips along the way that kind of became my part of the equation that I've used to successfully open up all the Calientes. So I think what I learned when I went to my first general manager's position is I worked for a guy that was really good at numbers, but he, for all extensive purposes, before he opened a pizza shop, he owned like 9 different properties, and he was what you would call a slumlord.
Yeah.
And the way he ran the pizza shops was, what was great about him is he showed me every single number. He was the first one to sit down and say, this is what they charge me for the dumpster service. This is what it costs to make a pizza. I think a lot of times people see a pizza for $11 and think that it costs $10, or it costs $2 to make it, or $1 to make it, and you're making $9 or $10 out of it. And really, there's so much more that goes into it, and I think he was the first one to show me all these numbers. He also was the type of guy that when the penny saver would show up for the bill, he'd tell me to go out and talk to him, and then he'd be out the back door, and you'd see his car leaving the parking lot. But what he really did well was he showed me all the numbers of how a business really operates. So that's what I picked up from him, and I picked it up young. And then he came to me after I was with him a year and a half. He had bought a second store, and he said, look, I'm going to be closing both the stores, because he wasn't having success opening up that second store. That was the second store kiss of death for him that a lot of business owners face too when they try to expand. So he let me go, and I went to it really hit me hard that I got fired, and it was the first time I ever got let go and the only time. But it really, we ended up having our second kid at the same time. So here I was, like 22, 23 with 2 kids, and at that time we had a house for a little bit, or 2 apartments, I guess, in those 2 or 3 years, and then we went back to living with my in-laws for a while and saving up money, and I got another general manager's job with a big national chain, and that's where I started to learn systems. And I think my favorite story of that is where I learned how to market, because at that time I was working 80, 90 hours a week, and there was all these different managers that were in Ohio, because the franchise group had 4 stores in Pittsburgh, 7 in Ohio. So once a month we'd drive out to Ohio and we'd have a meeting out there, and they would say, hey, Art in Youngstown's up 10%, clap for Art. Next time you go out, and it'd be like, hey, Tony from Astrobolah's up 15%, clap for him. And then in the meantime, when we were driving out to these meetings, the guys were all older than me. I was probably like a 23-year-old kid, and these guys are 35, 40, and 50, and they're saying, hey, the supervisor's talking about firing you because your oven's dirty or your walls are dirty. Meanwhile, I'm working like 80 hours a week, and I realized sales fixes everything. So I read Guerrilla Marketing front to cover. We go out to the next meeting, and they say, hey, everyone clap for Nick, he's up 10%. Next meeting, everybody clap for Nick, he's up 20%. The third meeting, everybody clap for Nick, or no, they said, Nick, tell everybody what you're doing, you're up 45%. And what I was doing was I had realized how to set up different places like swimming clubs where we'd sell at the swimming pool through the summer. We'd sell our pizzas. We were selling school lunches. We were selling at the football games. And then we were actually boxing up pizzas that weren't even sold yet that we would call hot selling. We'd take them around to the different construction sites and the different big box stores, and we walk in and say, hey, we have a $6 pepperoni pizza, hot and ready, and then they'd say, all right, we'll take 10 of them. And then I was giving the driver $1 for every one that he would sell, and then we would keep the rest of it. So we went from that store doing maybe like $5,500 a week to doing almost like $11,500 a week.
Jesus.
And then what happened was then I had their competitor come in and gave me a card and said, hey, we've heard about you, we want you to come work for us. And I was like, buddy, look at all these awards on the wall, I'm not going anywhere. Well, that card burned a hole in my pocket. And then for the called them back, and then for the next 5 years I spent with their company, and they had moved me from Pittsburgh out to Wilkes-Barre, and I was running one of the busiest stores in the state out there in the city of Wilkes-Barre. And I learned a lot from that company. They had 8 stores. They took me all these national conventions, sent me down to Florida to work for the #1 guy in their chain, who taught me how to run a college store. And I mean, I was seeing stuff at like 25 and 26 of very successful franchisees, guys who have been in business for 20 some years. And I think that's where I realized that, like I said, sales fixes everything. And that if you can figure out how to build sales in your business, you'll sustain, all the problems you could fix when you've got the money coming in. So I always wanted my own pizza shop, and I think at that point 2 kids, and they were like 5 and 3 or something like that, and my wife was starting to get a little burnt out, and I was starting to get burnt out of working all these 80, 90 hour weeks. And we moved back to Pittsburgh from Wilkes-Barre, and then we decided that we were going to go ahead and try and switch gears and get out of the pizza business.
Yep.
Because we said, you know what, it's just not working all these hours. And I started selling radio.
Okay.
And a couple things happened. One was I learned how to buy advertising, which is so valuable now.
100%.
But at the time, I learned that I hate cold calling. If they called me and said, hey, Nick, go sell this guy some radio, he wants to buy it, I could sell him everything. But if I had to walk into a furniture store and try and sell furniture or sell the ad to them, it just would never happen. I couldn't take a no. I hate cold calling. Lasted about 6 months. Then I started to get back into working for these different pizza shops. Started delivering a couple days a week. I started delivering for one of the guys that was in that car that I would go to the meetings with. I started delivering at his shop. So now I'm delivering at 2 different shops for one guy, an independent shop. Another guy, the guy I used to know. So I'm delivering at 3 shops. Doing really well. I buy a house delivering pizzas. I claimed every tip I was making. I think I still had that feeling of being like 27, 28, and family members would be like, oh, he just delivers pizza, and friends would say that. And I think that's like, I don't know what it was, but it just really didn't bother me. I just kept, I was proud that I could work, whatever it was, and support my family. I didn't care what I did. I think my grandfather always instilled in me, it doesn't matter what you do, even if it's shoveling manure, you just shovel it the best you can.
Right.
And that's kind of the way I took it. And I think from that experience, I said, okay, well, what am I going to do here? And I said, well, I think I'm going to take the mailman test, and I'm going to deliver mail. And that was like my next, it wasn't selling radio, so maybe it would be, I could go be a mailman. And then as soon as I got that job and passed the test, everyone's like, that's such a good job. We're so proud of you. You're going to be a mailman. I worked the first day, and I was like, I hate this. I was like, it is where dreams go to die, because people go there, they work there for 30 years, they clock out, and they're going to be, thinking they're getting a pension, and I just hated it. It was, you sort all this mail, and then you go deliver it, and it just was mental, physical, and awful. So I was there for 4 years, and while that was happening, one of the guys there recognized that I was a hard worker, and he asked me if I wanted to count money at the Civic Arena in the count room, which was a really cool job. You go and count hundreds of thousands of dollars with like 4 other people. You balance it to the penny. You're in spots that in the stadium that you would never be, or in the arena.
Handling tons of cash.
Tons of cash. But I remember like walking around the bend, and there's like Malkin and Jordan Stahl and Crosby, and they're all kicking a soccer ball.
Yep.
And you're standing like 2 feet from them, and like literally I knocked over Malkin's Mountain Dew before a game. Counting money, just walked by and knocked it over, and it was like all these like cool things that you're behind the scenes of the Civic Arena. So I'm counting money, I'm working at the post office, and I still have these 3 other delivery jobs. So now I'm working 5 jobs, so I'm back to 80, 90 hours a week. I'm grinding. And something happened. I realized what it was. I was like, you know what? I don't know why it's pizza, but I'm good at pizza, and that's what I want to do forever. And I also realized that no matter how I do pizza, I have to do it for myself. So then the one store I was delivering at came and said, hey, we want you to run the shop. We're going to fire your friend, no matter if you take the job or not. Do you want it? And I said, there's no way I can replace my friend. No. So 9 months later, they were going to fire his replacement. They said, do you want to run the shop? And I said, look, I will, but I also am going to keep the post office job, and so I can't work 90 hours a week here. If you don't care how many hours a week, I'll go ahead and run it. So they said, that's fine, we don't care, just make it profitable. So it went from $27,000 a year profitable to $147,000 profit in 1 year. They had been there 23 years, never did $1 million in sales. First year I was there, did $1 million in sales. The best thing that ever happened there, and the part of the equation I learned, was delegation.
Yep.
Because I was with that guy that would work 80, 90 hours a week, and a lot of it was because I was doing it myself. Now, only being there 35 to 40 hours a week, I had to find out and how to delegate and motivate all the people below me. And that was probably the biggest part of that story.
Yeah, you talk about being good at pizza, realizing you're good at pizza. I think a lot of people miss that. Everybody has weaknesses, and I think some people may focus on them too much. You got to find the thing you're good at and just hammer it.
Yeah.
And just go all in on that. And I think a lot of people try and overcomplicate, trying to make it in life. They always try and find like the next big thing. Sometimes it's the simple things, and it takes a lot of work. And a lot of people miss that you were in the pizza industry 10, 12 years before you started to even open your own store.
Yeah.
It just takes a lot of learning, and there's just so much more that goes into it on a daily basis.
It is, and I think a lot of times people try to get in too early. Like I literally was 16 years before I opened my own store, and I feel pretty comfortable saying I probably would have failed at maybe 8, 9 years, even though I thought I was ready. There were things that Yeah,
I came into the beer business at 22 with no experience and just got my ass kicked for 5 years.
Yeah.
Because, it's just, it was just going to happen that way, to learn the industry.
Well, they always say, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right, especially 22.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I do think, it's important to do something you love, because there are going to be a ton of hours, and, to stay motivated and not get burnt out. I think it's really important to do something that you love.
Yeah. And I think finally what happened was I parlayed all those 5 jobs into 2, delivering the mail and then working at the pizza shop as the general manager. And I said, you know what, that's it, I'm going to go for it. So I started walking into shops in Oakland, and I said, hey, sell me your pizza shop. And they're like, get the hell out. The 5th guy said, my buddy has a shop in Bloomfield. I walked in and I was like, oh no, it's a bar. Walked in the back, full pizza kitchen, everything we needed. We sat down, all the numbers lined up, and for the next 6 months I kept saying all I wanted was a pizza shop. And that's when, throughout then, that's when I learned that the beer was going to put people in the seats.
Yep.
That was the sales fixes everything part, is I just focused all on the beer. I had somebody with me that was running the pizza side in the back. I just focused on, getting the good beer in there and running the beer for probably a good 2 or 3 years. And then eventually our pizza caught up. I think people realized, like, hey, this is really good pizza. It's not just bar food. And then we started to win the local awards, and then the national awards, and then the international awards. And I think finally there was a part of me that kind of put my pride ahead of behind the business and just let the beer part speak, even though, I knew that was the key to it, so I let it speak. But when we started getting all the recognition for the pizza, it was kind of like full swing for me that I finally was like getting that part of what I really loved was kind of coming full circle, and I was starting to get the recognition for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely driven as hell. Is there something that you can pinpoint in your life that kind of instilled that in you, that drive and that work ethic, or it's just always been there? Or?
I think there's a lot of different things. I think, it's true that what you see is what you end up, either producing or trying to duplicate. And I think, I've always been in a family that would encourage, like, whatever you want to do. Like, even if it was like, hey, I want to play soccer. Okay, you play soccer. You play for 6 months and I didn't like it anymore. So, I want to go to art class. So then, I'd be in art class for 6 months or whatever. And I really didn't like art class. So they always move me. Whatever I want to do, my parents always let me do.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that, then there was a time when my uncle and aunt owned a butcher shop. And I remember going up there for deer season, and I helped them. I was the guy that would, probably 13-year-old kid. I was slicing jerky on the meat slicer for him. And, snowed really bad, and they lived up in Sarver. And they said, hey, you're going to have to sleep over. It was a school night. You're not going to make it to school. And I said, that's fine. So I go to bed, by 9, 10 o'clock on their couch in the living room. And my uncle's still over in the butcher shop. And he comes in probably 1 o'clock in the morning from the butcher shop after working all day. And then I open my eye about 4:30 in the morning. He's coming back down the stairs to go back across the yard to the butcher shop.
Yep.
And that always stuck with me, that work ethic. It always, that was, what made him successful. And I always looked up to him when, they would take a trip or get a new car or something. That it wasn't just like they got it given to him. I knew that they worked for it. And I think that was, probably part that always drove me. And then I think to kind of follow up on that story was about 2 years ago, he sold his whole business and moved to Florida. And when I went down to visit him, he said to me, are you getting taller? And I said, I don't think I'm getting taller. And he says, oh, I haven't been wearing shoes for the last 6 months. So, he did it right. He worked all his life, and then was able to sell his businesses at the end. He retired, and I think that's always been something that kind of stuck with me too, was having somebody like that, an uncle that kind of, I always saw that and looked up to him in that way.
Yeah. You talked about having a couple of young kids when you started your business. Was there ever times early on when you sat back and said, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Did you have that moment?
Well, I think there's, there's a lot to be said for that person that's next to you that believes in you.
Yep.
My wife's always believed in me, and that's been a huge part of it. And I think through this whole thing, she really believed in me. And like, there were times where, I would maybe be the one working the 80 hours, but she was the one going to birthday parties and communions with the kids without me.
Yeah.
Like, and everyone would say, like, do you even have a husband? Like, they were joking, but they were half serious.
Right.
And I think she always stuck beside me through all that. So I think that was probably that part of it was, she was kind of the backbone. And, we've had our ups and downs like any marriage, I think. But when you start to look at, like, someone always supporting you, I think, that was part of it. And I think what a lot of it was when you're going through that so young, that's where, I think the good marriages do go through things that make you better in the long run. And that was a lot of it was, when you're not there 80 hours a week, how do you communicate with somebody? And communication breakdown is the part that I think gets most marriages or most businesses or most friendships or whatever it is. That's when there's a communication breakdown, it breaks everything down. So I think just having that person there, my wife for me, really made all the difference.
And I feel like that definitely tested, because there's moments early on in a business especially where it's just, they have to have blind faith with you.
Yeah.
Like if things aren't going well, I think it says a lot about a partner when they're sticking with you. And
it really does. And I think we had never worked together. Like I said, she raised our kids, at home, and she didn't work. And when we went to open Caliente, she worked the front, I worked the back. We had to figure out how to work together. We had to figure out what her strengths are, what my strengths are. We always joke that we stay in our lane. Like at home, we won't clean the garage together because we know we can't.
Yeah.
And then I think we had to figure out at Caliente what we do well together and what we rely on the other one. She's definitely been the one that designs them all, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, because when we flipped Mount Lebanon like we did in 4 days, she was a big part of that. She becomes the foreman and puts everybody in line. Like this one took 6 weeks, and she did a total gut job on it, and she's the one guiding all that. And then afterwards, she does a lot with the front of the house, making sure the staff has training checklists and cleaning checklists and all that stuff. So I think there's been a big part. Once you figure out how to work with each other,
yep,
it can even be a greater strength. And plus, who's better to trust than your husband or your wife when you're running a business together too? Like, that's the hardest part of any business, people tell you, is trust with employees. And I think when you've got somebody like your wife next to you, you never doubt, what they're doing with the deposit when you hand it to them or something like that.
I'm really curious. You mentioned the second store kiss of death a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
How have you avoided that? I mean, 5 shops in 7 years, that's pretty impressive. How have you guys avoided that?
Well, the second one we got lucky on because it was 5 minutes from the house.
Okay.
And my wife worked there in high school, and I started my pizza career 100 yards across the street from it.
Okay.
So when we opened there, we thought, boy, we're going to have a lot of friends and family at this store. This is our hometown. This is going to be easy. And the thing happened was it wasn't all our friends and family, but we were extremely busy right from the beginning. And what it was people who were like, oh, we heard about you from Little Italy days. We've had your pizza when we were at the hospital in Bloomfield. We realized that Bloomfield was a great place to start because there are a lot of people get there, but they don't get there often.
Yep.
So they had tried it, but they don't visit it all the time. So once we realized we had something, that was pretty cool. And I was able to spend a lot of time there. And I had a really good worker that the guy who was running the pizza side now was running the bar and the pizza, or the bar and some of the other helpers running the pizza side in Bloomfield. So Bloomfield was pretty stable at that point, and I was able to run Hampton no problem. And I had a worker with me that was been with me a long time, and I was, even before Caliente came with me from the last place, even though I asked nobody to come with me, he ended up a few months later joined me. So somebody that I knew really well was helping me run that store. So we had no problem with the first and second store because the first guy was trained the way I trained him. The second store, the guy was trained the way I trained him. The one that was shaky was the third store because it was in Mount Lebanon, and if you're from Pittsburgh, you know that North Hills does not go across the bridges to go south.
Not at all.
So, it's funny. All the numbers matched up on that one. The money was right, and my wife and I, the last thing we said is, do we want to cross the bridge? And I said, if that's the only thing holding us back from the third store, let's go for it. But that's when we realized we needed systems. How many pepperonis do you put on a pizza? How do you pour beer? All these different things. And so we really worked hard for like the next year and a half to make a manual on everything that we make. We have in a manual, from a pepperoni pizza to a breadstick to a salad to margarita to a shot of tequila. Like everything's in a manual. And I think that's where we started to put systems and posters on board, and really trying to figure out how to duplicate everything. And that's where I think we've had a lot of growing pains, but I think the thing we've never got comfortable, and I think that's another thing that crushes a business is when you get comfortable and you think, okay, I've got 3 stores, I made it.
Yeah.
Like I've never felt like I've made it. I think in the beginning I said I'll be successful when I can buy a better car, get a bigger house, and know how I'm going to pay for my kids' college. Then once I realized that I was going to be able to do all those things, I said, you know what, I'm going to be successful when I can do that for the people who work for me.
Right.
When a guy who works for me can go buy a new car.
Which is a special thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And when all that stuff started to happen, and that's what really motivates me to open more stores, is because I really don't have to personally, but just like when we opened this store here that we're sitting in, Moreauville, when we opened it, I was able to take a guy who's been with me a year and a half as a cook. He's now the general manager of this store, worked his way up, and was able to give him an opportunity, able to hire a new bar manager in, able to promote our kitchen manager to assistant manager, able to bring in another assistant manager into our group. We've grown from, maybe 5 people working for us at manager wages to, 30. And I think that's been the big thing is, we've created a lot of jobs when you start to look at what we're doing for the local communities too. And I think that's been a big motivating factor for us.
Yeah, and again, in the book, you talk about how key a good team is, and you make a sports analogy to it, which I do all the time, across business, really.
Yes.
But, I mean, how key is it and how difficult is it to build good culture? I mean, because that's key to a business.
It's hard because I think what's hard is you think you got something going, and then you start to hear mumbles, and you got to figure out where the mumbles are coming from. Who's saying what?
Yeah.
Who's saying that thing that you don't care, or that, whatever they're saying. You got to figure out who's saying it, and the first thing is you got to figure out why they're saying it, and then you got to figure out if it's just the way they are. Because most of the time it's just somebody that's the way they are. They're the most negative person. They go from job to job. They hate every job they've ever worked at. And when you're sitting there interviewing somebody, and you say, hey, can you tell me about the last job, why they left? And they start talking about the horrible manager they had. Why'd you leave the job before that? Another horrible manager. Why'd you leave the job before that? Same thing. You realize, why do you want that person on your team? So I think, you got to establish getting people out that are those rotten apples that ruin the whole barrel. There's a lot of truth to that. I think you see it a lot in the NFL when you see the wide receiver slamming the Gatorade container on the sideline. That guy's got to go.
Addition by subtraction.
Yes,
yeah.
Big time. It doesn't matter if he's your best wide receiver you've ever had in a franchise of your company. He's going to bring you down.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing in business. It doesn't matter if it's your smoking hot general manager who's been your biggest sales builder. If they're the one spreading the rumors about you and talking bad, they're gonna ruin everything.
Yeah.
You need to get rid of them.
The one other thing I want to ask you about from the book is door hangers, because I've done them before and not had great success with them on the retail side. What's
Sure.
the secret to success with door hangers? Because I think it can be a great marketing tool.
It can be. I think so. I think there's a couple different things there, and that's why I kind of sighed for a second, because it's not a simple answer, because it's probably the best marketing trick there is.
Yep.
But it's probably the most difficult to pull off. So number one is you have to have a decent offer. And I think what we've done with a lot of different offers is, my favorite is we'll put Street of the Week and then put the special on there.
Okay.
And then so you're going there and they're reading it. They're like, oh, wow, we're the Street of the Week. So it's got a call of action. Order this week, get an extra large pizza, $10.99. So they're like, oh, well, we got to call right now because we're Street of the Week. Meanwhile, you have 10,000 flyers that say Street of the Week.
Yeah.
So that'd be number one. Number two is, and I learned this early on, is I thought I had this great crew. There are all these young kids. I would feed them and thought they were fantastic and was giving them extra bonuses for handing all the flyers out. And then this guy showed up and he was all pissed off from a car salesman shop or car lot. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, you keep putting all your stuff in my dumpster. I was like, what are you talking about? And he pulled out all these bags of all my door hangers. So the moral of the story there is you have to have somebody that you have to check it.
Right.
It's not even that you trust. You literally have to check.
Yep.
You pick them up, the door hangers, the 5 kids, and you say, all right, let's drive through the neighborhood, show me what you did.
Yeah.
And then that's how you do it. So you have a good offer, and then you literally check their work. And if you don't have the time to check their work, you might as well not even door hang.
Right.
So
that's good to know, because I think they can be effective.
It's very effective. And that's the thing that I like about Facebook now is you basically put an ad up there. You can narrow it down to zip codes.
Yep.
Not as well as doing the streets, but you can narrow it down pretty good and kind of hit whatever you want to target too. So that's pretty nice. You can do a mile from your shop.
Yeah, definitely.
And they can see a certain ad and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. The one other thing I want to ask you about, I spent 18 years growing up in LA, and chain pizza stores are big out there. Domino's, Papa John's, not a lot of local pizza shops.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh's a whole different animal. From what I can gather, the chains don't do super well out here. Tons of local pizza shops, pizzerias. Is there a reason for that, or what's made them so successful out here?
I think it's a great question, because that's who I worked for, was the Papa John's, the Domino's.
Yep.
And I don't know, some of the independents guys shy away from saying that, so that's why I really don't say it too much. I guess I've gotten accustomed to not saying that. The Papa John's where I was running up became the guy that was going to those meetings in Ohio, and then Domino's is the one that came and stole me away for the next 5 years. And it's true, man. When I went out to Wilkes-Barre, Domino's was the number one thing. People loved working for Domino's. People loved ordering from Domino's. It was crazy. But here in Pittsburgh, I think what happened, and this was probably before you were here, this Pizza Outlet came in. And that was the first one that I worked for. My theory is Pizza Outlet came in, opened up 50 shops. They bought all the Domino's out. They were here before Papa John's was big.
Okay.
Little Caesars were just in Kmart's at that time. So Pizza Outlet came in and saturated the market. Then what happened is they switched to Vocelli's, switched to frozen dough, basically ruined the market. So they kind of just saturated the market and then just kind of crapped on the market all at the same time. And I think that kind of ruined it. And then you see, like, there'd be a lot of Domino's owners that would think this is such a great market, so they would come in here from like other towns, and they actually made this one of the ones where Domino's would give you like an incentive to buy here, because they wanted franchises to be great.
Right.
They bring in a lot of great operators. Nobody could ever really tread water here. And then Papa John's was kind of the same thing. You know, I would see them come in and they think they could open all these stores, and it didn't matter how great the operator was, they just couldn't tread water. So I really think that a lot of it was because of the Pizza Outlets, and I think the reason Pizza Outlet did good is it was a franchise that started in Pittsburgh. So I think that was one of the reasons. But, you know, I was always a franchise guy. I wasn't ever on the independent side. It wasn't until I got into the independent side that I realized how much of a family it is across the country. I made a lot of great relationships of being in the independent scene. And I think it's changing all over, but I do think that, you know, at one time, definitely, like, the franchise, like, I always have probably a different flavor in my heart for the franchises compared to some independent guys. Like, I loved everything I learned was from those
just
guys.
coming up through it.
Yeah, all those systems and everything that I do now, like, a lot of it was stuff that they did. Like, you know, being able to read food costs and labor costs and really break down a P&L is because I worked for Domino's.
Yeah.
You know, not any other reason. Like, you know, that's another reason, like the kiss of death. I think a lot of times people can't, when they get to that second store, they just see sales and everything. They don't understand that what their food cost is or their labor or anything like that. And I think they get to that second store and they realize, you know, they've been running maybe a 35% food cost, but because they were doing so much sales in the first one, they could sustain that.
Yeah.
Then the sales aren't there in the second one. They're still running a 35% food cost, and it kills them.
And you've got to have systems in place, especially when you're
to.
not there 24/7 like you were at the first store.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I could tell you're kind of interested in the whole team part of it, and I think that's a lot of it too. Is you have to build a great team around you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've done really good, is building a great team around us, and
super key.
And bringing in people before we needed them too, bringing in like the regional chef, and then bringing in my office manager who does everything behind the scenes, and bringing in a marketing department towards the end of last year. So I think before we needed things, we brought that help in, and I think that's been key as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. You laid a lot of the groundwork for kind of what we're doing in craft beer, so I think it was an interesting interview.
Yeah, and I think everything you do is great too, and I think that's kind of why I want to be on too, is I see everything that you've done over the last definitely over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I think it's been a big difference. It's made it easier for me, like a guy like me who can't get doesn't have the legality to go get the beer anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you bring in a lot of this great beer that, you know, that we love, and I think it's been great to be able to add it to, and I'm happy to see that go well for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the support.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Once again, really want to thank Nick for coming on the podcast. Thought that was an amazing interview in terms of getting some insight on a bunch of different topics, building a business, kind of what it takes on a day-to-day basis, the grind, building a culture, building a team, getting into craft beer. You know, I thought personally the most interesting part was kind of getting an in-depth explanation of the gray market things that he used to do, bringing beer back from Philly. I know when it was happening, it was almost a little bit of a hush-hush thing in terms of around the industry. No one was really willing to talk about it as much. And as someone who loved craft beer back at that point and wasn't yet wholesaling, I always wondered how it happened and what went into it. So it was really cool to hear kind of a breakdown of that. And really get a breakdown of the pizza business. Another real interesting part was when he talked about the national chains and why they haven't caught on or done as well here in Pittsburgh. But overall, hope you guys really enjoyed that interview. Big thanks to Nick for coming on the podcast. Kind of being the first one in the boat there, first one to get an interview. We are working on not only getting some more interviews lined up for the podcast in the coming weeks, but also getting some awesome video content. Hoping to take a couple of road trips here in the next couple of weeks to get some content for you guys. Really, really looking to step it up, especially on the YouTube channel and the video content side of things. But I think that's about it for this week. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Nick, and be sure to check out the new beer review videos that we're going to be posting once a week on the YouTube channel. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.